What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 105. There you go. So I'm waiting for the screen to show up. 105 of ValueTown. I'm ChanManV, and Noxious is to my left, and then Raven is our guest today. Yeah, you're the one. Oh, whoa. I think, hold on a second. I think it messed up there. Okay, there we go. Yeah, so guys, Soddle's having some internet issues, so Raven was nice enough to come and jump in his place, even though we were been talking about asking you anyways. So this works out perfectly, dude. How you doing, man?
Yeah, really. I actually just disconnected Sol's internet so I could get onto the show. So it seemed to have worked. So, but yeah, I'm doing really good. I've been playing a hell of a lot of Hearthstone this week. So
really awesome.
I'm happy. Yeah,
perfect week then to have you on.
Yeah.
Noxious, how you been, man?
Been good. I've started. I'm bringing back some Randuin action in my daily routine when I play Hearthstone now, because I really want to play some cool, fun stuff. And there's actually a weird, interesting list that I'll present to the listeners and the viewers, with Randuin, like a Randuin theme to it, while still being semi-competitive in the teen ranges, which is fine for fun decks.
A little bit of Randuin in your life is what we all need in Hearthstone. Yeah, I've been playing same thing. I've been playing a lot of priests and pretty close to the one that we talked about last week, but very, very greedy. And I'm like, I'm gonna play a greedy deck this week, and I'm gonna expect to lose. But funny enough, it didn't happen that way, and we can talk. We're gonna get a chance to talk about it more during our week of Hearthstone. But yeah, so we're gonna be talking about obviously a lot of decks that we played, as we always do, and just what we've been doing with just the game itself. Tavern Brawl a little bit more, since last show, Tavern Brawl literally just came out, so we didn't get a chance to talk much about the 10-card Discover Tavern Brawl. We'll talk about the North America versus China crazy fiasco in just a second here. That was pretty interesting. And then we're going to introduce a couple of segments here, topic and tip of the week. Figure we would maybe focus on a specific topic in regards to the game, or maybe something that's going on, and then we just kind of dive into it. And then tip of the week, anything that we've got that maybe some kind of casual or newer players getting into Hearthstone could use, and maybe help them get going and becoming an awesome Q&A, of course, at the end of the show. Email your questions to valuetown@chanmanv.tv. If you want to get your questions in for probably next week. I think we've got a couple already for this. But in the future, if you want to get them in, go ahead and do that. But let's start off with talking a little bit more about the developers, since they seem to be communicating with us a lot now, in terms of text and video and interviews with other websites. And the latest, we actually have an interview with Tim Clark, from PC Gamers. Ben actually gave an interview here, and he talked about a few other things that weren't brought up in the developers. It's Developer Insight, right? Yeah, Developer Insight that we had the previous week. So I figured I'd bring up a couple of these. And so they actually bring up, all right, the whole question, is it patches that's the issue, or is it Buccaneer that's the issue? And Ben went ahead and said that he thinks that Buccaneer is the issue. And I think all of us agree that if you're going to choose between the two, it's going to be Buccaneer that you change. I know what you could change about patches. I mean, it's like he's a 1/1 already, and he's got charged. I mean,
he's
what
already
else?
Bad.
What else would you do to him, right? I mean, make him 2 mana. I mean,
I mean, there's pretty much just no realistic change, right, at all. Whereas Buccaneer, there's actually a lot you could mess with.
Yeah.
In Buccaneer, and actually make it more feasible to be a card in the meta at the moment.
Yeah, exactly. So it doesn't sound like it's going to be happening anytime super soon. But it does sound like they're taking a look at it, and I wouldn't be surprised if we actually, maybe in a few weeks, but definitely not like 1 or 2 weeks or so. Whatever. So, I'm happy about that. It'd be nice to see just Buccaneer maybe reduced in health, or even maybe his attack even reduced. Instead of 3, it's 2. Interesting too. What do you guys want to see? Like, how would you like to see that card nerfed?
The small time Buccaneer?
Yeah.
I mean, one of the easiest nerfs or changes would be to force, because it's meant to be a pirate card, right? Where you play it in a pirate deck, ideally, instead of it just being a patches enabler. So maybe it just gains extra attack per pirate you have. Or if you control, two pirates, it just gets an extra buff, or like +1 attack per pirate, or if you control 2 pirates, it get +2 attack. I don't know, just something that has to do with pirates, because the fact that it's weapon based makes it really difficult. If you make it a 1/1, it's horrible. If you give it only +1 attack, it's horrible. So what the fuck? Like I can't think of a solution that involves keeping the ability tied to what it already does.
I'm just wondering if, like, in a very simple way, just if you give it 1 health, like how much does that change? Because say it's like the pirate versus pirate decks or whatever. Well, whoever goes second can just kill off the Buccaneer anyway,
right?
Which is normally quite easy. And then also just there, mage, ping it, done. Shaman of Maelstrom, which would play that, which is an issue. He's doing the 2 damage, right? I feel so. I think it would still be played in like the Pirate Warrior, for example, like because it's just go face. Who cares? Sure. But they might scale back some of the rest of the cards. If you look at Swashbuckler, when that's played on turn 1 as rogue, you're never like, oh no, like this game's going to be over in 2 turns, because 1 damage is very easy to do in almost every class.
Right.
So I think that would be pretty reasonable. Still has the high damage output, because at the end of the day, it does require a weapon, which is asking something of the player. But I think the 1 health would be fine and very straightforward.
Yeah, it's like Flame Imp right now in neutral is just not a good thing to have. Like, you just don't want to give a Flame Imp to every class that can enable it in any way. So I agree that 3/2 is just over the top, but 3/1 is like, would you play a 1-mana 3/1 in an aggro deck? You probably would consider it. The issue is,
especially because it's if you're playing pirates anyway, it has other synergies, right?
Right, exactly. So if you're playing like the captain in the deck, or if you're playing all patches that comes out of the deck, that's already like a 1-mana 4/2 baseline. If you consider patches being brought out. So I mean, 1 health might be okay.
Yeah, you definitely play it in an aggro deck. I don't think there's any question about that. But to your point, with maybe half the classes being able to deal with it, or at least deal with it from the standpoint of tempo with a hero power, which every single one of those classes will be able to do that. That definitely brings the power level down just a slight bit. Which a lot of the matchups, when you're talking about the ones with pirates, some of them literally do just barely kill you. So it might actually bring it down to a reasonable position. But I don't like the fact that we call these decks pirates just because we've got 3 pirates in it. Yeah, that's like the lamest thing ever, right?
Well, it's more like 4 to 5, actually.
Yeah, I guess
like
maybe
the
5
real
if you're
pirate
talking about.
decks.
But Swashbuckler, they're not playing it because it's a pirate. I mean, there's just, there's other reasons to play it, right? For the draw and everything. But so
I guess
kind of, I don't know. I don't feel like it's like calling a dragon deck when you only run like 5 dragons, and that's,
but I think you would that's the thing though about Swashbuckler, is it's a great card, but it's also not really useful unless you've got stuff to counter with it to bring patches out. Like, if you really want card draw consistency in your Miracle Rogue, maybe you'd actually opt to just run, another counterfeit coin. Fuck if I know. If there's no patches for you to bring out, then you don't care about that general pirate package.
Yeah.
Then Swashbuckler is a lot less appealing, and it's more of a card you can include for value purposes later on if you play, I don't know, Bran in the deck against certain matchups. But it's not like an auto-include, whereas when you start running, a small-time Buccaneer and patches, suddenly the natural inclination you have is, I need more pirates to make sure that patches comes out a lot earlier and a lot more likely to come out than off the top of my deck, and thus Swashbuckler becomes an inclusion. So in that respect, I agree that it's not a pirate deck, but it also, the pirate tag does have quite a bit of value even on these minions.
Yeah, well, purely because of patches, but yeah. Okay, so it doesn't sound like they're going to 100% do it, but it's like, I'd be really surprised if they didn't do something, because there's nothing that's going to change unless there's a lot of new cards that come out on the reset, with the new expansion or whatever, or the new adventure that has something that deals with Small Town Buccaneer directly. Otherwise, it's like, what's going to change? Everybody.
I mean, there are cards that deal with it, just not on curve. There are a lot of cards that deal with small time. They just don't deal with the remnant patches. That is it. The biggest issue is you can deal with one or the other.
Right, but you have to think of it. But you have to think of it with both now. Like, there's no point in thinking of it individually, because individually they're fine. Like, individually their cards are okay. It's just in combo.
I think as well, one of the problem is that the whole strength of Buccaneer is having a weapon, right? Because that's what buffs its attack. If you play a minion that tries to like counter the Buccaneer, well, the weapon normally just kills that minion, right? Because you're always doing it on like the backswing, so you're always like a turn behind. And the second the Buccaneer gets like 2 straight hits in, that is huge. Like 6 damage, 1 mana, and it's got some form of trade or removal. Like that's insane. But it also, in terms of future expansions, limits any low-cost weapon that is printed, because then it just becomes even more ridiculous. You know, here's more easy weapons to equip. Look how good Buccaneer into Jade Claws is. Like, it's nuts. It's absolutely nuts. If they do that to any other class, it'll just blow it out of the water. It's crazy.
I mean, it reminds me a little bit of Spirit Claws in that way, because you can't print cheap spell damage minions. And one of the worst things about Spirit Claws is when it's bad, it's pretty bad. But when it's got spell damage to go with it, Jesus fuck is the snowball real, because they not only get a crazy weapon, but they also have the spell damage available to buff up their spells. So it's like, when Spirit Claws isn't working, you know, with the spell damage buff, it's not really that appealing. But the moment it becomes good, it becomes too good.
I would never say Spirit Claws
pretty bad.
is
You would
bad.
never play upgrade for the sake of upgrade. Like, you would just not. But the point is, the potential upside is so crazy, because you get to protect, you know, you have your spell damage totem, which you get to protect, and then you use that with Maelstrom Portal, which is a cheap spell. You have Lightning Bolt that can suddenly snipe stuff like Tomb Pillager and high health minions like Wormist Agent. All of that combination is just a bit too much, right? So it's like a card that comes in with a built-in snowball mechanic, like Small Time Buccaneer with weapons, where if it's good, it's too good. And if it's bad, well, you know, you don't really care about it.
Double snowball with the way Spirit Claws is now too.
Right, now it's like Spirit Claws gets like the spell damage and the Small Time Buccaneer, and that card has become, as a result of that, like, it's just completely fucking crazy. But Jade Claws is still better in a lot of instances.
It's not even about it's not even about it's the fact that they have so many different instances where they have a 1 or 2 drop that's power, or 1 or 2 turn that's powerful is why I shot. Okay, well, anyways, moving. Well, go ahead. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, I think when you start seeing almost any deck that can, whether it's mid range, late game, or aggro, run this composition of pirates, is when it's gone a bit too far, right? Because it just doesn't. You know, we saw like Live Coach at one point experimenting with the pirate package, not so much Buccaneer, but the pirate package in Reno Lock, like. That's to the extent it gets a little bit quick, just to counter the other people
it's more
playing
for
pirates.
It's defensive reasons.
Crazy,
actually. Yeah,
it's crazy,
and that's why. And that's why it's like, even some classes that we talked about Hunter last week, right? Like, what I think the question was would Hunter be good if we had a 2 mana weapon, like Glavzuka was, and for me the answer was it'd still be fine, because it's more for a defensive reason. It's not necessarily you're going to get the edge, higher percent of the time. Of course you won't if you don't have a 1 mana weapon, but you're going to have just enough to at least play the defensive role, and then you can, maybe flip it.
Hey, Chairman, come on. If Hunter had Glavzuka back, I'd be putting those bloody pirates in that Hunter list.
Oh, no, I'm saying, no, what I'm saying is, like, you would. It's just...
Yeah.
But what we were arguing is whether it would be good or bad, or how it would compare.
I think it'd be bad, but,
I actually think it would be good, but...
Sure. I just don't think a 2 mana weapon as the starting point is enough to make that package good. But
you have a 3 mana weapon too, so it's a little bit later. Slow. Yeah.
Most importantly, you have a 4/2 Buccaneer on turn 2.
I know, right? Exactly.
Nuts.
Okay, well,
sounds balanced.
Yeah. Well, in this interview, we kind of move on. They talk about some other things. Talking about whether you take some nerfs off of some previous cards, and doesn't really answer that too much, but the question does come up about nerfing cards versus just moving them to wild, and it is pretty clear that they want they like to just move stuff to wild. Yeah. And Rag came up. Rag has been kind of coming up in discussions again, since we're seeing it in some competitive events. I wouldn't say we're seeing it nearly as much as like Azure Drake or anything crazy like that, but
no, but it's definitely a very played as far as legendaries go, right?
Yeah, legendary wise, sure. Yeah, Rag. Rag for me is such an iconic card for Hearthstone. It's hard for me to imagine. I mean, I know it's an RNG. It is like the quintessential RNG card we've had since the beginning, but it's hard for me to imagine Hearthstone without Rag. I don't know. How do you guys feel about Rag?
I mean, I'm the same. Like it's such a huge character in Warcraft anyway, and it's like it's so good. But I think that I'm a fan of change to a large extent, and there's been some people like knocking around ideas of should they not quite Rag as the example, but all the core set legendaries for the classes, should they just get rid of them all to Wild and bring in new ones? Like a new core set of legendaries, right. Which would be cool. And they could, maybe do something similar with some of the legendaries that are neutral. Just whip some out and put some new ones in as like core set neutral legendaries. Because I think the volume of legendaries available is good. I think you want a lot because a lot of them do really weird things.
Yeah.
But I definitely think like I would be okay with Rag going into Wild, just because I like the meta like moving and changing.
Sure.
I don't really like it where it's like, oh no, this card, don't get rid of this card because then this class will change. Great. Like that's good.
Well,
like
yeah,
I think it's great.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, Rag isn't even a class card, so it's even more okay and from that standpoint, right? So I mean, me too. I mean, I definitely like change too. It's just, Wild, we don't really see too many things going on in Wild right now, at least from the standpoint of very public, very large scale events. So it won't be removed from the game by any means, but it's pretty much just going to be under the covers and only played by Wild folks, maybe Arena folks too, right?
Yeah, but I think as time passes, Wild is
no, because
more and more
Arena's
popular, right?
Yeah, Arena might be becoming standard. It might become standard, right? Yeah, so Rag is, is a card that's been around forever. We could say the same thing from Sylvanas.
Yep.
Those cards have been just the ones that you tell people when they're first starting off they should get because it's just generally powerful and never really gone away completely.
I think one of the things as well is like, do we really want Rag, Sylvanas, and all that to be in the set in 3 years' time? Is that really what people want? Like, you can love the card, and I love the card. I got it in gold. I think it's great, but the game's got to change. And if you keep, that's one of the issues that have been brought up a lot, right, in terms of the classic set sticking, potentially forever. So, I think it's the same issue with the legendaries too.
The game needs to change, but they need to. I mean, the reason why I think it's so slow for it to change is because they have this notion that they want people to be able to come back to Hearthstone and still have some familiarity with the cards that they were once playing, right? And Rag and Sylvanas are definitely those cards, and they even still have value in it. And if those cards are completely gone, thrown into Wild, essentially you don't have the same value. And
how about, and this is something like I'm a fan of, and I wish they would do more. They've done it once, and I think it would be great if they just released a new version of Ragnaros that did something different, like Light Lord, but like that's like class card and stuff.
Like they move Rag to Wild, and they create a new Rag that does something.
Do they create it, or do they actually like Rag is like a shifting Xeris that's in real time changes? They have core set classic Ragnaros in Wild or whatever, and then they create like Ragnaros Molten Core Boss, or whatever they want to call it. That was a terrible name, and it just is something.
Couldn't get much worse, right? In terms
the
of
Molten Core edition.
Like what are we doing right now? Ragnaros Molten.
You know what I mean? It could do something complete. It could, instead of doing the 8 damage, it could be a 4/4 that generates the
little emberlings or whatever.
The embers. It could create embers, or something completely different. But Ragnaros is still in the game. Like same with Sylvanas, right? They're key characters in the lore, and like I wouldn't mind them sticking, but they should change.
Okay,
definitely.
So here's a question, because that'll basically tackle one of the questions that they have to then answer when they decide to do that is, do we want Ragnaros as a character to be in the core set, and always around because we want people to be familiar with the character itself?
Yeah, I don't.
Or do they want the effect to be around, right? Because maybe what they're really looking for is for people to come back, say, "Oh, I know what Rag does," and just be familiar with not only the character but exactly the effect.
Yeah,
I like the in between where you keep the character around though. Like that's a way to keep people coming back and being familiar with it.
But that doesn't fix the issue that I feel like they're very cautious about. Like you want people to come back to the game and still have that kind of value they left. Like they still
throw them over to Wild. That's what I say. Point them in that direction and tell them to go.
I know, dude. I'm just bringing up the point. I actually think that they shouldn't. I mean, the game's supposed to change. I think people that leave the game and come back already have the expectation that it so it's fine to do that. But I feel like, that is one very strong sentiment that I'd be, I think that's one of the things that just keeps the changes moving slower.
Yeah, I think one of my worries with that, with the sort of that philosophy that they have in terms of getting some things to stick. Again, Ragnaros is the easy example, and I think Brode actually even mentioned something similar in this interview. Is every 8-mana legendary they design, is it better than Rag? No. Oh, never mind then.
It's the standard, basically.
Is it better than Rag? No. Well, I'll just play Rag then. And then they get into really weird design points. It's the piloted shredder argument, right? Of how they can't design something stronger because then everyone maybe it's too strong because Rag's strong in itself. They design something weaker, everyone already has Rag, everyone will just play Rag.
Yeah, I mean the biggest thing is that Rag originally, when people were, when we first were in beta and we were playing Rag, Rag was okay, it's one of those super control value, crazy value at the end of games. It's like Ysera. People were thinking that way. And then, of course, as people started to play more and more Hearthstone, it just became just a tempo finish, right? And that's what you end up having with these kind of cards that have a lot of value. Even Piloted Shredder is just being played in any old deck because of just how value. It didn't even matter for the synergistic. It was just
played in Face Hunter.
Yeah, it's just like the Pirates and the Warlock thing that you just talked about in Life Coach. It has nothing to do with the rest of the deck, but you just play it because it has so much damn value.
It's too good.
Yeah, I think we have to get away from that. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think Ragnaros is also one of those cards that, not only is it iconic, but it's one of those cards that creates more problems than it really solves in terms of competitive play. On one hand, all the audience loves it and it's fucking amazing, but that's the type of card that has the potential, if it's too high in appearance, I guess, if it shows up in too many decks in competitive environments, then it just discredits the whole, hey, this game is really just about decision making. Because I wouldn't go as far as saying it's Yogg-Strong, because it isn't. But if you look at the very early days of Hearthstone, that card, Ragnaros, was the biggest piece of RNG we had around. And back then, it felt like Yogg. Because that was literally the moment in the game where you just threw your hands up in the air and said, fuck it, Hail Mary time, baby. And it happened every single game in the beta and afterwards.
Do you remember? Because everyone was playing Faceless as well.
Yeah,
it was
exactly.
Always Rag, Faceless Rag, cross fingers. Oh, it missed. Cross fingers. He doesn't hit mine.
BGH, no. It was Faceless BGH. We're so stupid.
It would be Rag, and then it's okay, well, I play Sylvanas now, and then you combining all the crazy RNG. It was pretty wild. It created some wild times, but at this point, 3 years out, it's the RNG's gotten a little bit, or at least has kind of run its time, and it's time to get some just powerful cards that are interesting and require a lot of thought and skills to actually pull off. Okay, well, anyways, there's some other things in here. I feel like we've spent a lot of time on this already, but definitely check it out. PCgamers.com. Interview with Tim Clark, who's the author over there. But why don't we talk about the NA versus China tournament that happened last week? And we actually saw some really cool matches from it. We saw the one day where Sledonia carried the NA team and just team wiped the Chinese team. That was pretty amazing. It's a good moment for Sledonia, because
I'll take a split moment before we move forward to just say that Sledonia has been yes, but at the beginning I feel like his play wasn't remotely as tight as it is now. I feel like he's just, because he won a tournament right back then.
He won one of the Americas season champions.
Right. But even after that win, we saw him play, and I saw him play in other events, and I just wasn't quite convinced with the performance, because it was an era of Call of the Wild. That's what it was. It was I'm Call of the Wild and you rip. It was kind of a boring era for Hearthstone in many ways.
So in opening week for BlizzCon, he definitely had some. So even then, after he qualified and stuff, he definitely had some shaky moments. And I felt like he was one of the people who's very affected, maybe even emotionally, and let it impact his play by what had happened. If there was a bad turn or if he slipped up, it would really throw him off. But it does, every time I do see him play, it seems like he's just getting so much better.
It's insane, right?
So much more consistent. Yeah, so much better. It's crazy.
So just wanted to throw it out there. You know, this guy's definitely been putting in the work. When I initially talked to him after his America's qualifier, he wasn't too sure how seriously he wanted to take Hearthstone, right? Like he wanted to join a team right away and just get into the game, but he didn't know, how much time he would spend doing it. Because for him, that was kind of a side thing. He had a job already and was doing full-time work elsewhere as like freelancer of sorts. So anyway, very busy guy, and apparently he's been stepping up his game, and it shows in the results and the plays that he makes. So just really happy to see that.
Yeah, definitely a really good player, and like I said, just rising, especially in A ranks. I mean, there's a reason why he was chosen for the team, guys. Like I wouldn't say Sidonia's a big name player that you just want to be in an event to get viewership. So
they picked the top players from Gosu plus Reynad, right?
Okay, I didn't actually realize
they picked the top NA players.
That's right.
Sidonia's up there. Sidonia's
Exactly.
number one
Exactly.
at the moment in the Americas region.
Yeah, so it was Frozen, Sidonia, Chalky, and Reynad.
Reynad and Dog.
Reynad and Dog, yeah. So yeah, it was a solid team for sure. With Reynad and Dog obviously having draw and appeal too. And in the end, spoiler alert, the Chinese team ended up winning, but of course not with some drama involved, which in a match with Chalky and who's the other player?
LCN? I don't know.
LVNG or something. Wow, I should know. I was literally talking about this like a few hours ago.
Yeah, it's just slipping my mind.
It's like
LVGE, like luge, LVGE. And so they had a match, and at one point it was I believe it was LVGE's Reno Mage versus Chalky's Miracle Rogue, and it was turn 2. Chalky just happened to have Van Cleef in his hand, which isn't that which isn't that abnormal. A lot of rogues obviously try to play for that, but he had that in his hand, and of course LVGE had the Dirty Rat in his hand, and basically he ended up playing the Dirty Rat, which ended up pulling out the Van Cleef, and obviously that gave him a big advantage at that point because he didn't have much else except for spells in his hand. So the drama that came from this or stemmed from this was really in the fact that LVGE was able to hear something, in terms of what was being questioned, and what Reynad actually tweeted about was that his teammates basically yelled at one point to, in a way, signify to play the Dirty Rat.
It was as he hovered over the Dirty Rat.
Yeah, because he hovered over the Dirty
noise,
Rat, and then he started yelling, and that was that was basically unfair, and that's what ended up pulling out the Van Cleef and basically costing Chalky at least a big disadvantage, or putting him in a big disadvantage at that point. And since then the players gave their statements. LVGE said that he indeed did feel something. He didn't necessarily hear his teammates, but he could definitely feel the crowd, or some noise from the crowd, whenever he was trying to decide on that. But I don't think there's any player that, or at least majority by a lot, would say that you don't play Dirty Rat in that position, especially against Rogue, where you have literally game-ending cards that could come out on Dirty Rat on turn 2.
I think one of the things as well is Chalky actually kept 2 of his cards of his opening hand.
Right.
So
exactly.
Heaps versus Reno decks are Tomb Pillager, Azure Drake, Gadget Zan. Any of those come out, and you were in trouble. Like you could lose the game. As much as he won the game from that Dirty Rat to a large extent, you can lose the game if any of those minions. And what is Rogue keeping against Reno, right? It's going to be, you don't really keep questing. For example, it's not going to be a card you hold on to against, a Reno deck in your first turn. Like you're not really going to. So I think that was one of the issues, though. But I don't know. It was a production issue, in my opinion.
It was a production issue.
It was an organization problem.
I think as an organization, I think it's something that we could generally talk about too, which is, crowd noise. There are a lot of stages. I would say even like the BlizzCon stage. I believe, I obviously haven't been inside the booths, but I would be really surprised if you can't feel anything. Like you can't feel
the vibrations.
Yeah. When people are stomping on the ground and just like using like the sound noisemakers, there's got to be some kind of vibration, some kind of difference in your environment And that can be a little bit unfair. So really the question is I think we all can generally agree that we don't like to see kind of additional information given out like that. But at the same time, there are definitely plenty of other sports and games where the crowd is obviously a factor. Like when you have home teams playing, you got guys like yelling at them, and like literally booing and making noises and like trying to screw them up. So what are your thoughts on that sort of thing?
I mean, personally, I think the issue is really just like, from my understanding, the venue wasn't really set up so the players are separated at all, and that really didn't help. Because it's one thing to feel the crowd, and it's another to feel your team. And maybe see them out of the corner of the eye.
I mean,
I think they were pretty close. They were sat like.
It was a clip of it.
Not far away. I think it's pretty close. Yeah. I'm doing this I can show you what I'm putting. The satellite over there. You can see.
So it's one of those things where maybe like it could have been better thought out. Like the whole crowd's reacting. The only way you're gonna make a tournament fair is you have people supervising the players while they're playing at home, so they're not on a Skype call with someone else. And on top of that, you have to make sure that there's no crowd available next to them. Like it's fucking ridiculous. Like to actually isolate them, even in a player booth. They feel the vibrations. Like that's just not.
I think one of the issues is like, was there a need? And this is why I said it's sort of like an organization / production issue. Like, was there a real need for, while the game's going on, the players to be that close to the playing table when apparently there was no white noise in ear. Yep. There was only the Hearthstone music and then the sound cancelling headphones. And then the issue is, like, as you said, you can always, I've used sound cancelling headphones, and a lot of the time you can hear at least, inflection and like, mumblings and stuff. And the problem is, similar to what you said, Noxious, if the crowd's shouting stuff, then you're like, oh, well, it's going to change your play maybe a little bit, but sure. But when your team are sat very close, you hover a card and they go insane.
Yeah.
Well, you probably, have an idea. But also as well, I think it was really bad out of this whole situation, how badly the Chinese players have come off on this. Everyone is just like, oh, cheating Chinese players. But I'm like, I'm pretty sure they weren't cheating, in my opinion.
Not in that, like, not in a strict sense.
Purposefully. Yeah, I mean, not like that.
What really irks me, I guess, is like, this isn't even a marginally good play in any fucking circumstance, right? That's the only thing that gets to people, is if that play had been some kind of, oh, is he playing around Reno? No, he's going all in. All right, fucking fine. But you played Dirty Rat against a Rogue on turn 2 with only a Doomsayer as follow-up. Like, are you out of your fucking mind?
Well,
this is such nonsense.
You bring up a good point, because I think most Western players, even with, whatever instinct they have, I still don't think most Western players would have made that play.
You can't even hand read at that point. Because it's impossible to have got like any fucking
because
info.
logic just overrides it, or at least the probability of it being. Well,
the worst part is the hand read was the other way. The hand read told
exactly.
You. That's what I mean. That's what I'm saying. It's like, so I think the Western, even if they were being given, it's like a poker player, right? It's like a poker player who has a very large percent play that's very obvious normally by the book, right? If you're playing poker by the book, you just make this play. But because of some tell that you suspect from your opponent, you make a play that's against whatever the book is, right? It would be something like that. And for the most part, Western players, they don't do that. Like, it's very, very rare that I think they would jump on something that, I mean, it's a big swing. If you miss on Dirty Rat, it's like,
you'd probably just lose.
Yeah, it's like a huge flip of the situation.
I think as well.
You had a Forgotten Torch in your hands, because at least, the 2/6 live for whatever reason. Okay, it gets killed by Tomb Pillager. At least you can finish it off on the following turn. Nothing but Doomsayer. I'm sorry, dude. No, just.
I think though one of the issues as well is again, like, so I'm going to try and like defend the players a little bit. Sure. Is that if you're sat, you're that player and you hear that noise when you have a Dirty Rat, you cannot remove that from your mind, right? That happens, and it will affect your play. And even if he thought, oh, I heard them shout, oh, I should Dirty Rat, then you can't really blame him, right? Like, he's just doing what he thinks is right. And if you hear something, you kind of unhear it or unthink something, right? Like it happens. I genuinely think the issue was no one had thought about volume of the team potentially going crazy and sitting that close. And like that's the main issue for me.
When I made that point just a second ago, I wasn't implying that, they were, he was trying to cheat and, that's what it's just for me. It was just like, that just told you how definitive it was for him that was the case, and that's very, obviously concerning when you can relay it that. I mean, it's not a question of, it's more of a question of him mousing over. He's like, and then like mousing off. Like nothing, hearing nothing, and then mousing over.
I would have done. It's like, if that happened, I would have just kept mousing back and forth till the rope went.
So funny, dude.
Just to control the volume.
Hilarious.
I think the biggest shame as well is for the tournament to end on that note when the tournament was so sick. Overall, the production was amazing. The format was cool because we had moments like Sidonia going insane. We had the Chinese players bringing decks that were like specifically targeting certain other decks, to try and beat them out. It was really interesting and frankly a joy to watch up until that very end point where I was like, oh my God, they were so close. They were so close to just having a fantastic tournament regardless of who won. And there always had to be something, didn't there? Always.
It doesn't always have to be, but it seems to,
it feels like it.
Unfortunately,
It shows up a lot. That's Hearthstone.
So it's only going to be a topic this week. So, I mean, hopefully next time around, when they do it, and I'm sure they'll be organizing some more. They do something about it so that we don't have this kind of drama that actually delegitimizes or makes people delegitimize what was a great tournament. Okay, well, go ahead.
Last point. Very quick. I'm always really interested to find out or know if the production companies or whoever's actually running the show, hires anyone or speaks to anyone from Hearthstone, casters, players, whatever, in terms of what they think of the layout and what any problems they foresee. Because I feel like not a lot of these companies do, and I feel like for one of a few questions, they could solve some very simple issues. Like some very simple issues, and I feel like no one does it.
I remember Starladder had a really cool setup where they would take two players and put them in a room of their own, and that was like, that's it. They're one, they just they're in a room of their own. It's not always perfect because again, the crowd, you can hear, you can feel the vibrations, but there's no team that can remotely look at you. Like there's no possible eye contact or from the corner of your eye. There's nothing. Like you're in that one little area.
A lot of that's like a visual issue as well because you want them in the middle of people, and have the stage effect to a certain extent. But yeah, that was just my last point.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to ever have a way to, have the players be right up there with the crowd without it affecting, having this be an issue. I don't know. I still like, one thing about the, a lot of esports events. I feel like there still could be a bit more engagement, or not engagement, but like the crowd being a little bit closer to it all. Like right now, it is a way, we have these booths in whatever game, it could be League of Legends, whatever, right? Like we're totally removed from it and they come out of these things and, it's not the same as being like a basketball game where you're sitting right there, like the action's happening literally right in front of you. And I don't know, there's
which DreamHack was it? Was it DreamHack, Bucharest? That was like, was it 2014 where the crowd was like
around it,
right around the stage? Like, that looked amazing.
That's what I mean.
That looked amazing.
From a spectator, I think that is awesome. It's just we have to figure out a way to do it without having these situations that can affect the legitimacy of the competition itself.
Yeah.
I hope somebody can figure it out. Anyways, it was a great tournament. I still don't want to take away from it. I think Firebat was casting it right. I mean, he did a great job. I think a lot of people liked Firebat's casting there, and it was on his channel too. So definitely good job there. And who organized it again? Like, which company organized it? I forget.
So do I.
I forget.
Let's go with Alibaba.
Alibaba. It might have been Alibaba. Was it? It might have been Alibaba actually. Whoever it was, definitely do it again, guys, because it was really good.
I think it was NetEase. Those are usually the guys.
Oh yeah, NetEase.
Right. Oh, it was. Yeah.
I'm not sure if it was them this time around, but yeah.
Okay, well, why don't we move on to our Week in Hearthstone segment, where we talk about what we've been doing this week in Hearthstone. And let's start with the Tavern Brawl, since we didn't get a chance to talk about it too much. Did you guys get a chance to play a bunch of the 10-card Discover one?
I played exactly one game.
Oh, God.
Yeah, for some reason, everybody loved the hell out of that Brawl. I didn't have enough time to really get into it much.
It's fun.
What was the Brawl for someone who never plays?
Oh my gosh, Raven. Yeah. What kind of Hearthstoner are you? It's no, it was a
Hearthstoner.
It was one of those Tavern Brawls where you create. It was like one of those X card meta game.
Okay.
So you have 10 cards, and in the past, you would pick like 3 cards or 2 cards or something like that.
I did play the one with 2 cards.
Yeah. So it's similar in that regard. You pick 10 cards, but the cool thing is every time you draw a card, you get to discover them instead of just choosing, having a random one given to you. So you could, pick the one a little bit more situational to, time. And so the first part, 10 card meta is just a cool thing in general. I think, it's different than, obviously what we have with 30 card meta. And, we get a chance to play around with all kinds of different synergies and just how they kind of stack, right? If you can have 3 of them, that's maybe even more, right? So that was really cool. And then people experimenting with all kinds of different, like, cheesy, crazy things. Like I was doing Elise for a while, so I would get so many monkeys.
Oh my god, what the hell?
Yeah.
So
that's pretty fucking cool, actually.
When you discover, can you discover the same card like 5 times straight?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it's 10 cards, not like you can only have 3 of each.
You never actually draw.
You
just discover the whole time.
Oh, sick.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you discover choice, like you get a choice between 10 cards, basically.
Okay, that sounds cool.
So
I played Everything Can Happen Shaman, or Everything is Awesome Shaman.
Okay,
so you just
get
a bunch of Murlocs and play them for free, and then you play that for free, and then you win.
Yeah, that's pretty good. What were some of the other really good strategies? I think there was the Sorcerer's Apprentice, of course. Just crazy spells and things like that.
Fucking tempo, ga.
Tempo,
ga.
People
got know the words.
Yeah. I don't know.
Exodium Age.
Yeah. Anyways, I thought it was one of the best brawls, to be honest. It was I don't know, like, let's see, what was the other brawl that I felt like I still like the co-op brawl. That's definitely up there with.
I was so disappointed with that.
Really? I still liked it.
When they first announced it, right? And they were like, "Oh, it's going to be a co-op brawl." I was like, "Oh, sick! It's going to be a big board, 2 people at the bottom versus mega boss." I was like, "That would be so good!" And then they were like, "No, you just play this weird card against this minion that just hops across the board."
I agree, man.
No!
Without a new UI, it feels like you're losing out on so much of the co-op. Because the thing about the presentation of it is, I feel like, I get it. It's a card game. You want to be cooperating and, pitching each other the ball instead of having them both be on the same side.
Yeah.
But the thing is, I feel like it doesn't leave much to potential development in terms of, free play co-op. If there's ever a game mode that gets out.
You know what I was upset about? When I heard it and they said, "Oh, we're working on a co-op brawl," I was like, sick. Because then I thought, well, if they can put 2 players at the bottom of one side of the board, they can put 2 at the top. And then we could potentially in the future see something like, Life Coach and Tice versus JJ and Crane in a 2v2, like old school Yu-Gi-Oh battle, like from the series, like 2-on-2.
Right.
It would be so sick. I'll be like, oh my God.
You guys had way more.
Yeah, and then my dreams were crushed.
I was not surprised that they were working in the parameters of the 1v1, just game.
I was just disappointed. I wouldn't say surprised is the right word.
Here's the lesson, guys. For all you viewers, don't dream big because you'll just be
don't
upset,
dream
basically.
big. Oh man.
Don't listen to Taylor Swift.
Yeah, but anyways, this 10 card meta or this 10 card discover thing, I think was one of the best ones by question. No question. And you can always tell when the community goes nuts about a tavern brawl for days, not just a single day, then it was a success. Hopefully they'll do some more of it.
With the tavern brawls, I wish they included some kind of further reward. Because did you play the Diablo one?
Yeah,
So I played the Diablo Anniversary one, and you're playing crazy cards, right? All like weird new cards and stuff, and it's awesome. And then I just killed the guy. I was like, oh, okay, got my pack done. And then someone told me, because the guy has like 3 or 4 secrets live, right? At the start of the
you're
game.
talking about the Brawl with the Diablo. Yeah,
Yeah,
we played that.
Yeah.
I killed it
the
like
Diablo
instantly.
Brawl.
Yeah,
I did that. And then everyone was like, oh, you've got to find weird ways to proc the secrets. And I was like, but I got my pack. Like, I'm done. Like, why do I need to go back? Like, but if they said like, oh, well, if you proc all the secrets, you get 2 more packs. It's like some incentive, because I was literally like, oh, I killed him way quick. Back to ladder.
I literally killed him in
like,
4 turns or 5 turns.
It's just crazy. It's just, I just wish they'd take it maybe just one step a little bit further, but it's fine.
I think so.
I don't know. I'm not a huge like rewards guy just in general in video games. If there's something you give me a reward for and I just don't feel like doing it, you could pitch more shit at me and I still won't log on to do it. So I just want like compelling content, and I think that Diablo Brawl was one of those. I just didn't have much time in the days that it came out to really sit down and get it done, which I regret now. Like, I wish I could just go back and do all that stuff, because I killed him with Pirate Warrior, and I was just like, oh, well, I guess I'm done.
Got him.
Yeah, there's nothing else.
Got my pack, baby.
No secret triggered ever, and I'm just like, okay, I guess it was just like a bunch of bad mage secrets. Turns out,
and it wasn't. They were crazy.
It wasn't. Like, it was all these cow kings and
so if you got killed, you got resurrected, and stuff like that, which is cool. But I just thought, it's cool, but trying to ladder might be cooler. So I'm just gonna go back over to the ladder and play standard.
I never thought I'd hear anybody ever say those words in like a serious fashion.
I have actually like I
cooler.
have a real issue with games that if I don't see any form of progression or goal, like that is visible, like some way, like I just lose interest. Like single player games I love, but I play for a few hours, maybe even like 5-6 hours. I'm like, let's go back to my multiplayer games where I can beat someone up, like beat someone at something.
So you need some account progression on some in some form.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, why don't we talk about some of the decks we were playing this week? Let me go to the deck view. And I'll be honest, so I didn't actually bring a deck to discuss this week, because I was just basically playing that Greedy Priest I was showing last week, which last week I had just started playing it, like maybe the night before the show, so I didn't really get that many iterations through it. But that deck, which consisted of your Ysseras and Nefarians and like Thought Steals and Brewmasters and Operatives, it had dragons in it too, to get the max Historian Operative, just anything that like gives you cards, right? The definition of greed. That deck was climbing the ladder, believe it or not, which was pretty amazing. Like, it was shocking to me, because I was just playing it knowing that I was probably going to lose against anything aggro related, or maybe even some Jade Druid, which Jade Druid does beat that deck. But surprisingly, it did okay against aggro shaman and Jade shamans, and even decently against Pirate Warrior if you removed like maybe one greed card and put in like a heal, like a greater healing or something like that.
Just
something to buy a turn or two. Yeah, just something to buy a turn or two. And so that was super fun, like crazy fun. I had times where I was just like, many times where I'm like, I gotta just throw cards out because I can't even draw. I don't have any room to draw cards here, because I can Brand and Historian and Kazakis, and then Youthful Brewmaster, one of those, and then I'm stealing brands from him, and it's just like,
you probably won by just forcing people to rage quit. It sounds like the type of deck where I'd be like, awesome. This is taking too long. I can play 3 more games.
That
the amount of time
true.
It takes to beat you up. So I'm just gonna quit out and get back on the ladder before this guy starts again.
But here's the thing, though, right? You start the game and you play like 2 or 3 minutes of it, and 5, and then you're like, okay, maybe we can finish this in 1 more, and then you stick around, and by the end you spend 15 minutes in that game hoping that it would end earlier than it did. That's the problem with Priest, is like, you get into it, this could finish in 5 minutes, this could, and then like 15 minutes later you're like, holy shit, what have I done? And then you lose because attrition, and you've basically lost the game at that point.
Well, what's the best? You know what's the
You
best
sat
is
there
when,
wondering what you did with your life. It's
yeah,
crazy.
exactly, right. What's great is when you end up playing another priest, another Reno priest, and they're like, "Oh, yes, I'm gonna out." He's like, "I'm gonna outvalue you," and you're just
He
laughing.
doesn't
You're
know,
like,
man.
"Dude, I've got another 3 or 4 value cards that you don't have, man. I promise you don't." And you end up just wrecking other priests.
Yeah.
And I've beaten Reno Mage 100% with that deck. Like, not, I haven't lost a single time to Reno Priest with that deck. So it's actually really fun. If you guys want to check it out, watch the episode, check out the show notes from last week. And I replaced Paletris because Paletris wasn't a good enough value. I replaced him with Nefarian, and it's been working out pretty well.
It's not very good, but on the flip side, it's an awesome
True.
card.
It's an awesome card
I
when you're
think it's
talking
one
about
of the coolest
greed.
cards for priest. Yeah.
Okay, so anyways, you have a Reno Priest you wanted to talk about this week.
Well, actually, it's just to preface this. This is not a deck you want to play with to climb the ladder ever. Period. It's just a really fun fucking deck. So Randuin Rin is a deck, for those of you who are not familiar with the concept, that I created in the alpha that I eventually transitioned to the beta, which was all about random cards that had cool effects, with Anduin Rin being kind of the core. So random plus Anduin does Randuin. So that was the idea behind the deck. And unfortunately, the deck doesn't function anymore. You know, playing Millhouse, Metastorm, Lorewalker Cho, and all the random effects like Nat Pagel on top of that just is not going to yield you any functional victories. However, as it turns out, the Cabal faction is filled with random bullshit you can do, and Priest is still able to play Thoughtsteal and Mind Vision. And it can sprinkle in some, Museum Curator, Cabal Courier, Cabal Chemist, Nexus Champion Sarad, which works very well with the Raws of the Chain. The same thing with Confessor Paletris, also working with the Raws of the Chain. Slap in a Shifting Shade into that deck, a Kazakus to brew potions, a Tink, an extra hex, and you've got yourself a really fucking awesome Reno Priest to play. It's not the best Reno Priest. It doesn't have a crazy, value play against, if you're needing value. But it plays Yogg at the top end because that card still works when it does. It's just a beautiful.
Exactly.
I am so glad, Nox, that it is impossible for me to run into you on the ladder. Like I am very, very happy about it. Because if I was playing against this and I even looked like I was gonna lose, like I'm not an angry person, okay, but I would maybe get a little bit upset. Because this seems like a nightmare.
Not that bad. Because like if you let's say you take like Reno Dragon Priest, right? Let's take Reno Dragon Priest, right? We're gonna take that deck, and you just sub out like Twilight Drake for Shifting Shade. You sub out the Bookworm for Cabal Shadow Priest.
So you take all the good cards out and put in bad ones, yeah?
Well, I don't know, man. Like Bookworm, Cabal Shadow Priest, Azure Drake, Nexus Champion Sarad. Like the deck is still. Like it's still curving out in a very similar fashion. It's just playing other stuff in there that's more, discovery oriented, like Discover. No Twilight Whelp, no Wormist Agent, and instead Forbidden Shaping, Mind Vision. So it's just like a different, more spell-based approach. It's just more fun, but I don't know.
I'll tell you one thing. If you can get the right potion from Kazakis, you can make almost anything happen with Reno Priest. Man. Seriously.
This is like
you can make
you don't need it. This deck just does Reno things baseline. It's just disgusting.
Do you not run Soul Priest?
Sorry?
No.
Do you run Soul Priest? No.
Yakanai? No, I don't.
So you're doing this, but you don't want the chance at just one turn killing someone with the infinite combo.
I tried to the thing I'd sub out is like Tankmaster Overspark, right? Like it's like the one thing that I would sub out.
Okay.
The issue is like if I play Soul Priest, I want Wild Pyro, which is great in these types of decks. And then I want to play Circle, and then everything just goes to crap because it's no longer consistent deck. So I've been very happy with the results, by the way. Like the win rate of this deck, starting from rank 16, I streaked to like rank 13. So just to put it into perspective, it's like a deck that in the teen range will win. It's just once you hit like the Pirate Warrior package.
I just looked the way you were like, yeah, I didn't want to put in these cards because it would make the deck inconsistent.
Right,
like,
it wouldn't make
the deck point
fun.
of the deck to be.
No, it's consistently capable of pulling off stupid shit.
Consistently inconsistent. Yeah. Okay, I get it.
Consistently able to do like the most random shit, and that's what I play it for. So if the deck wasn't designed to live until it could do stupid shit, it wouldn't even be fun. Which is why I had to stray away from just Randuin with like double Mind Vision, double Mind Games, double Thoughtsteal, because that was fun back when Control Warrior didn't even run any threats, and now it's like I can't play Mind Games. Like it's just gonna bring out a garbage 1/1, and I'm dead on board. Like you can't even play Thoughtsteal on curve 99% of the time nowadays. Like it's just never happening. So it's just trying to win against the aggro stuff while maintaining a really fun factor against the slower deck. So,
well, that's what I mean. Like,
Yeah.
like when you first glance at this thing, you're like, okay, if you miss Doomsayer in the beginning, unlike the dragon stuff, which has taunts that can actually absorb it, you don't have it. And I've gone through some of my bad draws like early on, or when I don't hit taunts and stuff. And for me, as long as I hit Kazakus and have an additional scenario to board remove at 5 and just reset everything, like, then that's what I mean. So it can fix so many things. Kazakus just fixes so many things for these type of priest decks. And it makes it
madness.
Yeah, it makes it work.
I actually think as well, obviously depending on what the new cards look like from the new set, I think Priest might edge itself out as the stronger Highlander deck.
Oh, for sure. I think they've already said that.
In the long run, yeah.
Yeah, I think they've already said that they want it to be. That's why they have Raza, right? And
yeah, I mean, Raza's insane. And just Greater Healing Potion is sick.
It's disgusting.
It's so
Reno
good.
can leave and you have the Greater Healing, you're still okay.
Yeah, it's true.
It's insane.
Yeah, so definitely a fun deck to play. And every game is different. That's the beauty of these type of decks where you're drawing like a ton, and this one's even more random than mine. Like there's all kinds of different cards come in, but every game is different. It's awesome. It's like it's great. Okay, so we actually had a I think it was an email. No, it was a comment on the YouTube VOD last week where we were talking about hand buffing pallies, or grimy goons type of paladins. And you mentioned, you can get the legend with grimy goons decks or just hand buffing paladins. So they're like, it'd be cool to see which ones that Noxious was talking about. So I was like, okay, I'll just ask him to see which ones they were. So you brought 3 of them today. So let's take a look at them. And and prefacing this, I tried for like a day or two, tried really hard to build a good mid-range one. Not one that was like, super crazy aggro, and yes, everybody's done that. But I tried to make one that was like legitimately, mid-range and just solid, with doppelganger and everything like that. I lost so many games, dude. I mean, like, it was insane how many games I lost. So I just finally just gave up. Yeah. So, okay, so this is the first one we're looking at. Mid-range hand buff. What is this?
All right, so this is the default version that I would run if I were trying to build a vanilla hand buff. That is exactly what it would look like. So it's running, double Smuggler's Run, double Grime Street Outfitter, and double Grime Street Enforcer on 5 mana as hand buffs. You don't want to run anything else. There's really no point to it. These are all the Paladin ones. You don't want to be putting the, what's the name of it? The 3-cost neutral guy that does the same thing. Like, you just don't need a 3-mana 2/4 that buffs 1 minion. So you're looking to mass buff, right, with this. And the goal, like, the biggest weakness of Paladin in the metagame is the aggro deck that exists. And it just literally runs all over you, and there's nothing you can do. That has been the biggest issue of Paladin in many cases. And the deck addresses that. It's running double Worgen Infiltrator, double Argent Lance, double Flame Juggler, which at first seems like a shitty idea until you actually do it, because you realize that if you even land like a single buff on a 3 or 4 drop, those aggro decks just shit their pants in many cases. And suddenly you get like a really you get a 4/6, a 5/6 second rate bruiser, a 4/6 Senjin Shield Master, a 3/3 Wicker Flame Burn Bristle. That's 1 buff. And because the deck needs to capitalize on those buffs when it's trying to be proactive, as it is a mid-range deck, it sometimes needs to be proactive. It's also running all the Divine Shield minions that have charge. Double Argent Commander, double Argent Horse Rider. Most brain-dead deck to build if you actually know what the hand buff mechanic is meant to do in Paladin. Once you figure out what the mechanic was built for, this deck kind of builds itself. And that's why I was so surprised to see so many people struggle with the idea, because the biggest trap card for a mid-range hand buff deck is Doppelgangster. Like, that's what I realized on day one. I tried to build, Blubber, Baron, Doppelgangster, and I realized mid-range, hand buff Pally cannot make that card work. A control version could probably run it as like a one-of, as a single-handed win condition when you flood the board with one big-ass Doppelgangster that just wins after like a board clear was established. But in a mid-range deck, that's like competing with, a good 5-drop like the Enforcer on 5 mana. So you'd still have to play it very, very late in the game, in which case running 2 copies of it, not relevant. Very often you manage to buff 1 and the second one comes off the top and you have no more hand buffs, so it's still a 2/2, useless. So the second copy I tend to just throw out. And the weirdest card in the deck was the Ancient of Blossoms for me. the 6-mana 3/8
yeah.
taunt, which used to be a Sunwalker, right? And what I realized is oftentimes Sunwalker's shield gets popped for 1 damage. So it's really just a 4/6. So what the fuck do I need a 4/6 for when I can make a 3/8 instead? There's literally never been a scenario where that was relevant to me. The only case was against the Priest when they could Shadow Word Pain or Bookworm the 3/8.
Yeah.
But oftentimes I found that Sunwalker, if I buffed it once, became a 5/6 and then died to Shadow Word Death, or the 3/8 became a 4/8. 4/9 that didn't die to anything. So like all these realizations, when you put them together, just make sense against the meta. So is this deck really, really good? Probably not, enough to be considered tier 1, but I wouldn't put it, below tier 3 or 2, like maybe 3. And I feel like most underrated archetype of the expansion is the hand buffeted by far. Like it's ridiculously underrated.
Did you test the Paladin 1/2s, the one drop
Yeah,
that if it's buffed it draws? Was that any good?
It was good when I tried to play an aggressive version of hand buff.
Oh, okay. I've only ever tried it in the aggro list. That's all.
Right.
Yeah.
In aggro, it's really good.
Just because Cycle's good in this deck, right? Because you don't want to buff when you've got no cards. Like that's one of the biggest problems, right? It's the problem Hunter has. Like this, but give it a buff card, hand buff cards. Oh wait, they never have any cards. So
Yeah, it's amazing in Pally for that. So
the biggest. It's funny that you had that same revelation with Ancient Blossoms, because I had the same revelations with that whenever I was trying it. But the issue I have with Paladin building this type of deck is that this type of deck is the one that when you fall behind you just lose. Like you can't catch. Like shamans have so much power that even if you get like a turn 4, turn 5, and a turn 6 type of taunt, they still get through you, which is kind of crazy. So
trying to beat shaman right now is a fucking waste of your time. Like just don't take it. Like so, here's the thing, right? We're taking a tier 3 or 4 class or an archetype that's not tier 1, right? And then we're trying to make it the best we can, and the best we can may not be the best deck. Like we can't make. It's like you can't make a crazy Reno Priest the best deck in the meta if it's not like a dragon-oriented one. So you just take the deck to the maximum potential you can, and that's the end of it. And that's what I think a list like a mid-range deck would look like if I had to build it.
Yeah, I agree with that, but it's just, for me, a tier 3 deck would have to be, like something that you can climb with. And
you can climb to legend with this, eyes closed, no fucking problem.
I think
I'm willing to bet my fucking soul on it.
My question is, like, to me, a deck like this needs to be very sort of aimed at a certain archetype. What decks does this beat quite easily? Like, what have you had the most success with? Because, like you said, there's no point trying to beat out Shaman at the moment because it's insane. But like, what
actually beat Shaman with Argent Lance. Yeah, well, yes, it does against Rogue because of the amount of chargers you get, but it's actually not bad against Shaman. Like they just panic when you drop a 4/6 Senjin. It's a lot of damage wasted. Like second rate Bruiser and Senjin against Shaman when they hit 1 buff is retarded. It's ridiculous. And then you get Ardent Commander snipe off totems, Horse Rider kills totems for free. Like these cards are completely busted.
Oh, I
don't know, man.
Yeah, I mean, I know what you mean by that, but it is one of those decks where there is no board clear. So if for whatever reason you don't even start off with your curve, you generally don't come back from it. Like especially with Shaman that has that super quick start ability in the first 3 turns. So if you did, let's say you drew your 3, 4, and 5 cards, and you don't get that lance, or you don't get that. Even if you don't get an Acolyte of Pain to potentially draw some, right?
We're running tough. Like 6 cards that are below 2 mana. They're 2 mana or less, right? 8 if you count the Grime Street Outfitter, which helps you transition into a 3/2 Horse Rider. So really the big deal is oftentimes with the deck you end up just hard mulliganing because you're looking for those cheap drops. If you hit one of them, your win rate just shoots up. Like it's crazy how big it gets, and it's very tough to push a hand buff streak off a board. Like it's really tough to push a deck that's able to curve naturally, that plays hand buffs off of their board as soon as they have it. And I think you run enough taunts and value removal. Because the thing is, your removal, something a lot of people bitch about in Paladin, is effectively your chargers with Divine Shield, your Aldor Peacekeeper, your Chosen Champion. Like, you basically have 6 to 7 pieces of removal. If you include Argent Lances, you have even more. And then you've got the Worgen Infiltrator, which often is just a Holy Smite. If not more in the mid game, I've had this guy be a 6/5 with stealth in the late game where I just snark because I don't need him, and it wins games on its own. It's like it's one of those things where I feel like people underrate the amount of removal that you can find in just having minions. So I don't know, man. I beat pirate decks all the time, like the Pirate Warrior. Rogue just gets shat on. That's great.
Yeah, Rogue
Dragon
for sure
Priest, I
is
can
like a good
win
matchup.
because weapons are sick.
The Dragon Priest is kind of interesting. It would be pretty. I think it would be pretty close and competitive. You can get the 4/9, and you can get like your minions to 4 attack, then it can do really well against
stop.
it. Yeah,
Just, like,
exactly,
stop
and
right
just
there.
stop. That's actually really good. I just when I was playing, I had so much trouble with Shaman. I had so much trouble with Reno decks too, that it was it was just hard to win. There are a lot of cool dynamics though, like little things that Noxious was talking about that a lot of people, you can't actually theorize about. You actually have to go and play games to actually see it in action, right? And see how these cards actually do incorporate into a lot of the popular decks, or how it deals with popular decks, or is able to get advantages. And I mean, even Tyrion, like there were times where I questioned even putting Tyrion in the deck. Like
he was like a very fringe. I wouldn't say card in the deck given the game plan, but it's such an auto win when it lands that it's just hard to. It's hard to justify.
It's a taunt too. The biggest
right?
thing is it's a taunt for me. It has Divine Shield. Otherwise, it's kind of like it's not that typical value Tyrion play because by that time it's like you want it to be your last card. It's like, okay, this is my last card. I'm just slapping it down. I hope I win the game. Kind of thing. But generally speaking, you're not gonna. You don't want it early, that's for sure, and you don't care if it gets buffed that much either. It's already good the way it is
on its own, right? You don't need to make it any better than it is.
Right, and that's like Don Hancho too. It's like if you're not playing Doppelgangster, then Don Hancho is like you get a +5/+5 on something that it probably isn't going to make the biggest impact unless you're playing, like a Reno lock or something where you actually need. Like a large amount of damage in 2 turns.
Yeah,
I think the important thing is or at least deck is the mixture of like taunts and charge minions.
Yeah,
because the buffs on those minions are worth so much more than a buff on a regular minion. Because
absolutely.
Don Hancho on a charge minion, okay, I'm in. And then Don Hancho on a taunt minion or any buff makes that taunt minion just so much better. So yeah, I like the build. I don't know if I play it too much, but it looks cool. It looks like definitely one of the better builds I've seen.
Yeah,
you have to try it to really get it though, because I've tried to basically you can't even. It's funny with that specific archetype because I've never been able to just theorize a deck that worked. I had to play the deck so much.
Yeah, you have to
find
play
its weaknesses.
it. Yeah, and then you realize how important Argent Lance is, and actually one card that's very disappointing, I have to say, is Wicker Flame. I don't actually think Wicker Flame.
Sorry,
Wicker Flame Burn Bristle, the heal taunt at 3. I don't think he does much for me. Very often he just doesn't do much because the opponent handles him with spells a lot. So that's one card I haven't been too pleased with. Every time I play Paladin, I don't know if you had the same experience or not. In theory, it's great.
In this
like,
deck has been doing amazing work, but I could see how you don't like it.
I think he has a very specific role, right? Like he does certain things very, very well. Like you want to drop that guy on 3 against a pirate deck, right? Like you always want it, but then against anything more control-y, it's kind of just a 3-mana 2/2 to a certain extent. Any Reno deck, it's probably just like, okay, I'll just kill it. I don't really care.
I mean, even if you do get him like in a Pirate Warrior, yeah, it's great. You're gonna heal twice, but he doesn't really impact the board enough that. That card doesn't save you.
No,
if you
it's
don't have
really
any more
good
heals.
against. No, it's really sick against Pirate Warrior, right? Like mitigating damage and healing at the same time. Because oftentimes when it comes down, you've already taken 6.
I don't disagree with that.
So it's basically a 3-mana heal 6, which I find pretty reasonable just in general.
It can set the trades can set up for the kill trades as well the turn after. So when something like goes into it, you can actually it makes things like Frothing Berserker just easier to deal with because they're not at 4 health anymore. They're at 2. So it can help on that. But looks good.
It was just through my experience, at least. In theory, I think it's great. It's just it rarely saves me, but that's one of the things I felt like I had to do was add a little bit of heal to this deck, a tiny bit, just to last.
I don't know where you'd find the room.
Yeah, I don't either. That's why it was tough.
I've really tried to cut one Argent Lance, find some form of healing, and frankly, it's just been you better just draw and try to create one counter swing. Because like, I've had many turns where, the game kind of, I just barely make it against aggro, and against the other mid-range decks is just, all right, here's me controlling their board a little bit early game, trying to set up buffs. There's many cases where I basically hero power over Grime Street Outfitter, like on turn 2, almost every game, because it makes no sense.
Yeah.
Right, to play the Outfitter. So I end up playing it on turn 5 because I know they have to, worry about what's coming next, and I just go, Aldor Senjin on 7. One of them's a 6/6, the other is like a crazy, taunt, and they're just looking at this like, whoa, what just happened for 7 mana? Yeah. It's like, you remember the days of Emperor just killing you in Patron, where you couldn't account for the exact bullshit that we're going to pull out? The hand buff creates that, where they know the mana cost, you just don't know what it's going to do. Like, they have no understanding of where it's going to lead. So
I hear you. All right.
Anyway.